Hi, it's Katrina. This sacred scripture of ancient Rome, the nameless lord of pre-Inca Peru, and a sorcerer who made a pact with the devil. Today is all about strange places and lost knowledge from the ancient world, so subscribe and let's go! Secrets in Ethiopia. Let's take a trip to Ethiopia, to one of the most mysterious countries on the planet. Home of the Ark of the Covenant, the Queen of Sheba, and rock churches carved by angels. Let's focus today on Lalibela and its mysteries. It's in the heart of Ethiopia, a town founded just shy of 1,000 years ago by a king who wanted to build a new Jerusalem in Africa. The city of Lalibela is home to 11 monolithic churches, the biggest of their kind on the entire planet. They've been standing practically in perfect condition for at least the last 800 years. Modern archaeologists can't figure out how the churches were built. The tools and techniques needed for building these marvels shouldn't have existed 800 years ago. It doesn't help that archaeologists can't agree on anything. Some say there is no mystery. The churches were carved with simple tools by dedicated Christians. Then there are people like David Phillipson, a professor of African archaeology at Cambridge University. David believes the churches were carved 500 years earlier than accepted. These are not just churches. They are massive buildings of worship, each one carved from a single block of stone, and they are interconnected by a maze of subterranean tunnels. The biggest of them all, called the House of Medhane, is 33 feet tall and 108 feet long. It's considered one of the greatest architectural wonders of the ancient world. But what about those angels? Legend has it that when King Lalibela founded the city during his reign between 1181 and 1221, angels were sent from heaven to help the Ethiopians build their great churches. What's really interesting is, unlike most legends where angels come down from heaven and do the impossible in a single night, it took these angels 24 years to build the churches. This adds a suspicious layer of realism to the legend, making it feel maybe a little more believable. I really want to convey just how much work it would have taken to build the Lalibela churches. Most scientists agree it took between 10 to 30 years to build the Great Pyramid of Giza. Modern archaeologists think it would have been impossible to build the 11 churches in 24 years, like the legend claims. It was easier to build the pyramids than the churches. Then there is the issue with the dirt. Scientists have never been able to figure out where the countless tons of dirt and rock went while the churches were being built. It's like it all just disappeared. There's a lot of speculation surrounding the churches. Some think there is more to them than meets the eye. There could be secrets buried below their foundations, hidden knowledge kept from prying human eyes by the angels who helped build this place. After all, Ethiopia is allegedly home to the Ark of the Covenant, hidden within a church just miles to the north of Lalibela in the ancient city of Aksum. Who's to say what else is stashed away in this country? The Cilene Prophecies of ancient Rome. Before Rome was ruled by emperors, Rome was ruled by kings. And when it came to ruling, those kings sought the assistance of magical oracles who could see into the future. This sounds like the premise of a fantasy movie, but it's 100% reality. In Greek mythology, a woman named Sibyl was the original prophetess gifted with the ability of foresight. The myth says that her power was her downfall, with Sibyl driven to madness because of her uncontrollable visions of the future. What's crazy is that as time passed, real-life Sibyls began to appear across the Mediterranean. Women of unknown origin became mystical seers, looking into the future and divining what was to come. Historians don't know how it happened, but soon the Cilene prophetesses became an integral part of Rome. Roman rulers employed Sibyllene oracles to help them understand things that were going on in the world. Only the king's oracle could properly interpret strange phenomena, catastrophes, and certain solar events like eclipses. Though to be sure, the influence of these gifted women went further than interpreting natural disasters. They also guided kings when it came to things like foreign conflicts. When they weren't busy controlling the world as part of a feminine shadow cult of magicians, they wrote books. They are called the Sibylline books, or sometimes the Sibylline poems. By the time the last king of Rome took the throne in 534 BC, these books were already considered ancient and legendary. They were said to contain all the accumulated knowledge of each Sibyl prophetess. The pages were filled with predictions of doomsday scenarios, prophecies of tragic events to come, predictions of Rome's future, historical allusions, and a lot of criticisms. The oracles were particularly harsh of the Romans, whom they said would befall great misfortune due to their lives of indulgence and sin. The books came from across the Mediterranean, gathered by Rome's last king, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus. He wished to possess all of the Sibylline books, and sent word of his wish across the kingdom. Legend has it that one of the Sibyls came to him with 9 of the prophetic books. She offered to sell them to the king for a humongous price. The king guffawed. Hey, that's a word you don't hear much these days. The king said there was no way he would pay such a sum for some silly books. So the Sibyl started burning them. She burned 3 and offered the 6 remaining books to the king for the same outrageous price. When he refused, she burned 3 more. Finally, the king ended up paying the original asking price, but only got 3 of the 9 books the Sibyl brought to him. Lucius preserved them in a sacred vault underneath the Temple of Jupiter. I know this is only a legend, but the books were absolutely real. How they were acquired by the king is inconsequential. The important part is that he acquired and kept them. Then, when Rome transitioned into a republic, the Roman Senate kept tight control over the prophetic books. You're not going to believe how seriously the Roman Senate took these books of prophecy. Keep watching to learn what became of these mystical books. And now for a quick break, because it's shoutout time! I want to give a huge thank you to Carmeline Nash for the generous super thanks. It really means a lot. If you are new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button and join us for more videos like these. The Secrets of Tikal. Archaeologists have stumbled upon something deep in the Guatemalan jungle that could change everything. Ever since John Lloyd Stephens rediscovered the lost civilization of the Maya in 1839, they've been a source of mystery and intrigue. All these years later, scientists are still struggling to unravel their ancient history that was covered by the jungle. It's true that the Maya still live today, both in Mexico and Central America, but there aren't nearly as many Mayans as there used to be, with some estimating there were 20 million people in the Maya Empire 1,000 years ago. They were spread across Belize, Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, and southern Mexico. The majority lived in Guatemala, with one of the largest populations centering in the city of Tikal. The city was likely founded around 1000 BC, making it as old or older than the Hebrew Bible and the Israelites' exodus from Egypt. Tikal has been explored a lot, picked apart by archaeologists for more than a century, but it was only in 2016 that scientists started to get a real picture of what they were dealing with. Remote sensing technology allowed a group of scientists to get a glimpse at the original size of Tikal. Scientists with the Foundation of Maya Cultural and Natural Heritage used LiDAR technology to pierce through hundreds of years of dirt and overgrown forest. What they revealed was a humongous pyramid towering above the ruins of a neighborhood nobody had known was there. The scans showed that the city of Tikal stretched beyond the borders of its tourist zone, way into the jungle for miles. This was an epic metropolis, one that could rival even the biggest cities of today. Check out the actual LiDAR scan by Thomas Garrison. You can see the fragments of the city stretching away from its core, suburb upon suburb, trickling away. The consensus now is that Tikal and its population exceeded anything previously imagined. Then, in 900 AD, the whole place was deserted for unknown reasons. More than 100,000 people got up and left almost overnight. Nobody knows what happened. Maybe it was drought, maybe famine, maybe war, or maybe something so bizarre nobody's even comprehended it yet. There's one other thing you need to know about Tikal. Professor Louis Grazioso from the University of San Carlos said Tikal was created like a map of the stars. The entire city was laid out to mimic the cosmos, with temples and pyramids acting as the stars and the planets in the sky. The Maya had an unbelievable knowledge of the heavens. But how and to what extent? What did they know about the cosmos that we still don't? The origin of Stonehenge. Archaeologists believe they may have just solved one of the most confounding mysteries of Stonehenge. It's a mystery that dates back 5,000 years, to when a group of mysterious builders decided they would spend the next 500 years constructing a monument on the Salisbury Plain of the United Kingdom. As you might already know, Stonehenge's blue stones have been traced to a site in Wales. Most of the huge building blocks were carried across an entire country to be erected on the plain here. It's unlikely that you or I will ever know how the stones were moved, nor what the motivation was. It's all too bizarre to comprehend. What you might not know is that there were other stones that didn't come from Wales. The blue stones are the smaller ones, but the Saracens are way bigger, with some of them weighing up to 25 tons. The Saracens are the really big rocks, the great pillars that throw long shadows across the green grass at Stonehenge. New evidence suggests the massive Saracen stones came from about 15 miles away in a wooded area. Not only that, but scientists think they know how many there originally were. It looks like there may have been 80 Saracens transported from the woodland to Stonehenge, probably at the same time. This would have been a mass operation with hundreds or thousands of workers moving the stones. In case you're not familiar with the conversion, I should tell you that 25 tons is more than 50,000 pounds. How in the world do you drag a stone that's 50,000 pounds and 30 feet long 15 inches? Never mind 15 miles. David Nash, the lead author of the new study, said it's insane if you think about it. David Nash and his team conducted chemical analysis of stones in an area known as the West Woods. The chemical composition of stones in the woodland is identical to 50 Saracens still remaining at Stonehenge. They share the same chemical makeup. There are even Saracens in Westwoods that nobody found before. Take a look at this abandoned Saracen stone, picture thanks to Katie Whitaker. Doesn't look that impressive, but how could it? The stone has been hiding in the woods for 5,000 years. David Nash said this new discovery has offered evidence that the builders of Stonehenge did not cut rocks from convenient areas. The blue stones, which only weigh around 5 tons, were dragged from Preseli Hills in Wales. That's a distance of 150 miles. The builders must have known something that scientists can't figure out. There's a piece of the puzzle just out of reach, and I want to know what it is. How did they move the stones? And what did they know about specific rocks that made them worth transporting such vast distances? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The prehistoric history of Margar. Margar is one of the most mysterious Neolithic sites in the world. People were living here 9,000 years ago, at a time when most human beings in the world were still hiding in caves, trying not to be eaten by lions. Archaeological digs at Margar have uncovered proof of some of the earliest farming ever. But who were these early farmers living in a random corner of the world near the Indus River in modern-day Pakistan? Scientists wish they knew more about Margar. The first man to take the site seriously was French archaeologist Jean-François Jarige, who excavated it from 1974 to 1986. Evidence from those over 10 long years of digging suggests that Margar may have been the origin of the Indus Valley Civilization. I have a hunch you've heard about the Indus Valley Civilization before, but just in case, here's a quick recap. They are considered on par with other early human enterprises in China, Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Peru. In other words, the Indus Valley culture came into being at the dawn of modern civilization. Only the Indus Valley was unique in that they had no military, no ruling class, no conflict, and no religion. They appeared about 5,000 years ago and are still one of very few utopian societies to ever exist. If archaeologists can trace the origin of this civilization back to the Neolithic farming village of Margar, it will be huge. But it's a hard thing to pull off. There was a massive hiatus, with archaeologists ignoring the site for more than a decade. A handful of excavations got started again in the late 1990s. Researchers are still piecing together the history of the region from little more than mud ruins and broken pottery. There is no evidence of a written language, no evidence of religion, yet there must be clues that scientists haven't found yet. How did a small farming village from this long ago lead to the only known utopian empire in the world? That is the mystery. The Polish Sorcerer and the Devil. What would it take for you to sell your soul to the devil? Fame? Fortune? Eternal life? In 16th century Poland, striking deals with the devil was something people really considered. This was a time when magicians were still around, when people believed in the mysteries of magic. I'd like to introduce you to Pan Twardowski, a man who may have possessed a fantastic knowledge of the occult, the likes of which hasn't been seen since the end of the Middle Ages. Pan allegedly got his powers from the devil. The story goes that Pan lived in Krakow during the 1500s. He was a Polish nobleman who believed the devil could grant him abilities beyond that of a mortal man. He also thought himself clever enough to fool the ruler of hell. When he sold his soul to the archdemon, Pan added a clause in his contract. The clause stated that the devil could only take Pan's soul to hell when he was in the city of Rome. Pan figured his way out of the contract was that he would never go to Rome, so the devil could never get his soul. Pan was given magic powers. He suddenly had the knowledge necessary to become rich and famous, and to manipulate the laws of magic and astrology. He could even summon ghosts using a magic mirror and forbidden texts. After years of hiding from the devil, Pan's luck ran out. He visited an inn called Rizum, which means Rome in Polish, and the devil took his soul. It was a technicality that worked out in the devil's favor. Pan's soul was sucked down into infernal damnation. Pan Twardowski is part myth, part reality. He may have been a real sorcerer who lived in Poland almost 500 years ago. But the real point of the story is the magical aspect, and especially the communion with spirits. Throughout the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance, spirit communication was standard among scholars. You couldn't be a philosopher or alchemist in the 1500s without practicing spirit communication. This was the time of Nostradamus. One of his patrons and die-hard believers was the French queen, Catherine de Medici. What I want to know, and I'm sure you're with me here, is how much of all of this is true. Could people in the Middle Ages have known how to contact the spirits? Could they have possessed knowledge only gained by trading souls with demons and devils? What do you think? The fate of the Cilene Prophecies. From the birth of the Roman Republic in 509 and until 367 BC, only two of the most important people in the Roman Senate were allowed to even look at the Cilene books. That was how seriously the Romans treated the prophecies. Then, around 138 BC, the Quindecimviri Sacris Facundis was founded. This was a group of 15 men, typically ex-consuls and former praetors, charged with safeguarding the Cilene books. These books were the holiest of holies in the Roman Republic. These men didn't just guard the scripture, they consulted and interpreted the words of the ancient oracles. This was done at the command of the Senate, with the custodians of the books responsible for determining the outcome of possible events based on what the Sibyls wrote centuries before. If there was an earthquake, a plague, or a comet seen in the sky, answers were found in the Cilene books. Putting prophecy aside, these books were so much more than just magical texts. They were the ancient Roman equivalent of the United States Constitution. The Cilene books had become, after 500 years, part of the very fabric of Roman identity. The Constitution was written in 1787 and ratified in 1788, put into operation in 1789. It's only been a little more than 200 years. The Cilene books played a similar role as the Constitution until the last known consultation in 363 AD. The Romans trusted the books for almost 1,000 years. But they did change with time. In 83 BC, the Temple of Jupiter burned to the ground. The vault that had held the Holy Roman Scripture since the days of King Superbus was destroyed, and with it every single one of the ancient books. In 76 BC, the Roman Senate was in such disarray that they sent envoys across the world in an epic quest to find copies of the books. Mystical scrolls and manuscripts came from all across the globe, taken from Africa, Sicily, Samos, Ilium, everywhere to create create a new Sibylline collection, but it was never the same. In 12 BC, the new collection was transferred to the Temple of Apollo in Palatinus by Emperor Augustus. The Roman Empire was now in full swing, and times were changing. The books continue to be an important part of Roman society, but not like they used to be. In the 1st century BC, Jewish and Christian authors began manipulating these old books. They corrupted and altered the books, changing them to contain passages relating to Jesus Christ, God, sin, heaven, hell. It was a nightmare that resulted in the creation of the Sibylline oracles, a twisted version of the original texts emphasizing the importance of Christ and the sin of pagan religion. It was around this same time, in the 1st and 2nd centuries, that the books became weaponized. They were used as a political tool, which ultimately led to their destruction in 408 AD at the hands of General Flavius Stilicho. Flavius believed the books had become too corrupted to allow them to remain intact. They were more dangerous than helpful. As the barbarians banged on the doors of Rome, Flavius destroyed the Sibylline books once and for all. Not a single copy has survived. The buried bones of the lords of Sipan. Compared to the tombs of the lords of Sipan, Egypt's Valley of the Kings is boring. You're going to be astonished by the riches and mysteries of these ancient Peruvian burials. The story is almost as amazing as what was discovered. In 1987, archaeologist Walter Alba was working as the director of Lambayeque's Bruning Museum. He received a phone call from the chief of police, who had recovered some looted items and wanted the director's opinion. When Walter arrived at the police station, he found a few items waiting for him wrapped in paper. One was a pure gold face mask with huge turquoise eyes. Another was a giant cat head made from solid gold, its teeth crafted from shell. Never before had Walter seen such amazing items. The cops told him they had been stolen from the site of Huacarrajada, near the village of Sipan. By dawn the next day, Walter, his assistant Luis Chero, and 20 cops were standing before the ruins of a pyramid. They weren't alone. The site was swarmed by locals frantically digging with rusty shovels, desperately trying to reach the treasure hidden below the pyramid. It had been standing by their village for centuries, and nobody had ever thought it contained treasure. This was the beginning of a great adventure. Over the next 20 years, Walter and his colleagues chased away tomb raiders and dug down beneath the pyramid. They uncovered so much treasure that museums have been built just to house it all. As Walter dug, he came upon a man in a seated position, his feet severed. A little bit deeper was the entrance to a tomb. The man buried before it had likely been a guard, his feet cut off so he could never abandon his post. That's some serious job security. In the center of the tomb was a wooden sarcophagus, the first of its kind to be found in the Americas. Inside the box was more treasure and a skeleton. The skeleton belonged to a man who was between 35 and 45 when he died. He stood about 5'4" and was dressed in full royal regalia, including a headdress made of gold, a gold face mask, jewelry inlaid with turquoise, huge necklaces of silver, and a warrior's shield made of pure gold. In his right hand was a golden scepter in the form of an upside-down pyramid. Nowhere in ancient Egypt has a pharaoh been found this decked out in gold. Who in the world was this guy? He belonged to the Moche civilization, a powerful group that dominated Peru more than 1,000 years before the Inca. This man would have been a king, likely buried around the year 250 AD. He wasn't alone in his tomb either. The Lord of Sipan was buried with 6 other people. A child around the age of 9 or 10 was buried near his head. It's believed the child was his. 2 men were on one side of his coffin. The sheer size of their bones suggests that they were warriors, ready to fight by the Lord's side. At his feet, in coffins made of cane, were 2 women, and another buried near his head. These were likely the king's wives. It's believed they were all sacrificed after his death so that they could be buried with him. Oh, and I shouldn't forget the dog and 2 llamas, possibly his pets. Here's where things get seriously messed up. In 1988, archaeologists discovered a second tomb. It belonged to a priest, the second most important man in the local region. Archaeologists say his duty was to collect blood from sacrificial victims. then feed the blood to the Lord of Sipan. There have been 14 elite burials found at the site of Huaca Rajada, making it one of the most important archaeological zones on the planet. Yet few have ever heard of it. To this day, the Lord of Sipan is a mystery. Nobody knows his name. Nobody knows why his chief priest fed him blood. The secrets of the Moche civilization were lost with these ancient lords. Shocking artifacts in Russian coal. 300 million years ago, the Earth was entering its midlife crisis. It was just a few years after its 4 billionth birthday, and strange new life forms were evolving on its surface and in its oceans. Dinosaurs weren't around yet, but there were some very early land animals. After so many years as a lifeless rock, planet Earth was becoming very busy. But were there people around? People as in humans? Or perhaps a race of incredibly intelligent spiders who could use tools? These might seem like silly questions now, but wait until you hear what I have to say next. In Russia, a piece of a gear shift was discovered embedded inside a chunk of coal from 300 million years ago. It was found by a man named Dmitry while working near Vladivostok, close to the border of China. Dmitry heated his home using chunks of coal. As he was about to throw one in the furnace, he noticed something strange pressed into it. When he broke the chunk open, he found a metallic rod sort of thing. It looked like a metal rail with teeth on it, like a gear from some big piece of machinery. Dmitry, baffled by a piece of modern tech inside an ancient chunk of coal, reached out to experts. And that is when biologist Valerie Breyer got involved. The piece of coal was traced back to some coal mines where the deposits are 300 million years old. Then the coal was treated with chemical agents. A team of scientists determined the inexplicable object to be 98% aluminum and 2% magnesium. What this means is that the metallic object was created artificially. It's not something that occurs in nature. But how did it get into a chunk of coal? Could everything we know be wrong? There are those who doubt the legitimacy of Dmitry's discovery. But then, what about all the other out-of-place artifacts found in mines from Russia to South America? There are just too many relics found trapped in coal, nearly all of them from 300 million years ago. So it's hard to ignore. If you haven't heard about other coal-entrapped artifacts, I highly suggest watching some of my most recent videos on unexplainable objects. It will blow your mind. The spells of ancient Greece. The Greek magical papyri is one of the most famous book of spells and rituals. If you were to sit down and read this book from cover to cover, you would probably get up feeling like Harry Potter, maybe Hermione. That's how much magic and esoteric knowledge is hidden within its pages. The book itself is a collection of various writings from ancient Egypt when it was dominated by the Greeks and Romans. Although the work is written in Greek, many sections are in Egyptian Demotic and Old Coptic. Regardless of what language it's in, the book is bursting with spells. Most of them date to before the age of Christ to around 100 BC, but spells continue to be added through the manuscript up until around 400 AD. I've talked about this book before, but I've never given specific details on any of the texts. I'd like to change that by talking about the Mithras Liturgy, one of the spells that can be found in the book. The Mithras Liturgy is an invocation. For those of you who may not be magically inclined, an invocation is like a summoning spell. When ancient people wanted to curse an enemy, they would invoke the name of a god for power. This invocation is of the god Helios Mithras, one of the most popular gods of the Roman Empire. Mithras was worshipped by the Iranians starting about 3,000 years ago. He was a sun god, deity of light and justice and truth. He was the good one, the shining god people prayed to for guidance. In Rome, about 2,000 years ago, Mithras got combined with Helios, who had been the sun god. This new hybrid deity was said to bestow secrets of immortality on those who worshipped him. The Mithras liturgy outlined in this magical book is completed in 7 stages. The soul must ascend through each described stage before Mithras reveals how to become immortal. Yes, the book does have instructions for the rituals necessary to ascend each of the 7 stages. And no, I'm not going to give you the secrets of immortality. I'm just not sure creating immortal people is appropriate for YouTube. The Greek magical papyri is full of many other spells, rituals, formula, invocations, and esoteric philosophies. It has a lot of stuff in it. Even when it was written 2 millennia ago, the contents of the book were seen as dangerously magical. I can't vouch for any of the spells. Maybe they work, maybe they don't. Maybe you need the original text to cast the spells properly. Very few pieces of the original book are left. There are only a few fragments, like this one on display at the Louvre in France. Do you believe that magic once had a place in this world? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching! Be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time. Bye!
Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
The oldest Buddhist temple. The very first Buddhist temple ever constructed may have just been unearthed in northern Pakistan. The temple was discovered in the Swat Valley, which is part of the ancient Gandhara region that was conquered by Alexander the Great in the 3rd century BC. It was the arrival of the Greeks and Macedonians that spawned a unique mixture of Buddhist belief and Greek artwork. In other words, it was the merging of two very different worlds. You could see Buddhas with Greek columns. Based on what little evidence they have, archaeologists believe the temple was constructed in the middle of the 2nd century BC, when Gandhara was ruled by the Indo-Greek kingdom. But what's fascinating is that researchers found traces of an even older Buddhist temple underneath it, probably from the century before. What that means is that the older temple, which is almost beyond recognition because it's so badly damaged, was constructed just shortly after the death of the Buddha. It's believed he died around 483 BC. This discovery is like finding the very first church built after the death of Jesus Christ. It's shocking, but hasn't been 100% confirmed. All archaeologists know now, as they excavate the remains of the temple, is that it is very, very old. Who built it and why they chose this particular place is a complete mystery. The First Shipyard. Marine archaeologists have made an unbelievable discovery off the coast of England. They have just identified a shipyard 8,000 years old, which they believe to be the first of its kind anywhere on the planet. They discovered a huge number of timber boards sitting on the floor of the ocean, which were likely once part of a platform. The submerged structure had almost definitely been part of a primitive port. The discovery is thanks to expert divers with the Maritime Archaeology Trust. They were searching along the submerged landscape at Boulder Cliff, what was once a valley populated by Stone Age humans, but is now over 30 feet underwater. There are no less than 5 archaeological sites in this one region. This was once part of the landmass which connected the island of Great Britain to the continent of Europe. It was home to all kinds of Stone Age settlers who had to flee when the ocean levels rose and their homes were swallowed and submerged. But by far, the most interesting discovery has been that of the shipyard. DNA analysis of the wooden material proved it to be the oldest boat-building site ever discovered. And because the tide is constantly shifting, and what is visible at the bottom of the ocean is always changing, each year brings something new. The most recent season helped divers uncover over 60 pieces of trimmed timbers that had once been part of the shipyard. To have something dating back 8,000 years ago is impressive in itself, but to have remnants of wood used by ancient people dating back that much is almost a miracle. The first common currency. Archaeologists appear to finally agree on the first common currency used in Europe. As it turns out, the very first standardized form of currency used across the American continent 5,000 years ago came in 3 forms. People used rings, bangles, and the blades of axes as the earliest forms of cash. These things were standardized by both shape and weight and accepted as tangible currency anywhere goods could be purchased. At least this is what researchers at Leiden University have confirmed. The Dutch researchers looked at over 5,000 axe blades and rings from around the year 2150 to 1700 BC. That's around 450 years, with the artifacts being taken from Germany to Scandinavia. Researchers uncovered not just single objects, but whole hordes of these scraps that had been buried by people trying to protect their wealth. What the study found was that regardless of region or time, each axe blade and bangle were almost identical in weight, shape, and size. 70% of the rings weighed roughly 195 grams. It was a remarkable achievement by primitive humans, considering they didn't even have any proper measurement system to make their currency uniform. This displays one of the most significant advancements in human intellect in our history, and it was undoubtedly the first step towards a global economy. The Psy Canoe. The Psy Canoe is considered to be the oldest boat in the world. There could have been an older boat made, But if there was, scientists haven't found it yet. Carbon dating has placed the canoe as being crafted sometime between 8040 BC and 7510 BC. This was a time when human beings were still hunter-gatherers, not living in major settlements and preferring to wander around the land hunting and surviving. It was also around the time that humans learned how to make sharper and more intricate tools out of stone, specifically things like knives, arrowheads, and axes. The canoe was discovered during the construction of a motorway in the Netherlands back in 1955, near the village of Pesse. That's actually how it got its name. One of the local workers noticed it sticking out from the remnant of an old tree, and it was salvaged and brought to the University of Groningen. Once there, the Psy Canoe was freeze-dried to keep it from deteriorating. The canoe is just about 10 feet long, carved in the shape of a small boat. It was undoubtedly used for floating around on lakes or down rivers, but probably not for the open ocean. We don't know which culture is responsible for its creation, or if it was used primarily as a fishing vessel. We do know it was made out of a single Scots pine log, the same type of wood used by later civilizations to create dugout canoes. But perhaps the biggest mystery is that a very similar canoe, the second oldest boat ever discovered, was found several thousand miles away near the Dufuna village of Nigeria. Nobody has ever been able to make a clear connection between the two, although they are nearly identical and made 2,000 years apart. That's amazing! Do you have any ideas about what the connection could be? Share your ideas in the comments. Babylonian Map of the World. For all you cartographer fans out there, let's take a look at the very first map ever made. It's the Babylonian Map of the World, drawn on a tablet and inscribed in cuneiform script. It shows Mesopotamia as being the entire world, with Babylon at its center. The middle area of the map is completely ringed by a waterway called the Salt Sea. The outer area, beyond the Salt Sea, is divided into 8 specific regions. Each of these regions is described on the same tablet as being a place of horrible monsters, mythical beasts, and great, powerful heroes. It seems that the Babylonians believed that once you crossed over the Great Salty Sea, you wound up in unknown lands of horror and mystery. It's all quite exciting and must have felt even more exciting for the ancient Mesopotamians. They believed themselves to be the center of the world, surrounded by gods and beasts and mythical lands. The map is not only proof of this fantasy world they lived in, but the first serious example of geography. Not every place appears to be in its correct position, but this is the earliest example of a map, created in Babylon around 3,000 years ago. What do you think it was like believing the world was riddled with monsters and mythical realms? Living in the past seems to have been quite scary. Let me know in the comments. The first ear surgery. The earliest evidence of ear surgery goes back 5,300 years. A team of researchers at the University of Valladolid in Spain discovered the very first known surgical operation performed on a person's ear. The discovery came from a human skull found at a dig site called the Dolmen of El Pendonis. Previous research showed that it was used as a funerary complex around the year 3800 BC, then continuously for about 800 years. Primitive humans used the site as a mass graveyard. When researchers took the skull out of the ground and decided to analyze it, they came across something unbelievable. The skull showed evidence of surgery. It looks like the patient, a woman around the age of 35, had a mastoidectomy. This is still a procedure done today to clean out the area in the skull behind a person's ear after it's become infected. If the infection isn't cleaned, a person can go deaf or die. This woman had the procedure done in both her ears. Whatever the infection was, it must have caused her incredible pain because the surgery would have been brutal. A doctor from the Stone Age used a primitive implement, probably made from flint, to puncture the skull and remove the infected cells. How did they even know what they were doing? Do you think this was ancient medicine or torture? Let me know in the comments. The first city. If you've ever laid in bed at night and wondered what the very first city on Earth was, I have some excellent news for you. The very first city that fits every official definition of a city is called Uruk, and it was first settled around the year 4500 BC in Mesopotamia. It's important to note that there were other settlements before Uruk: Jericho, Eridu and Sidon were all inhabited before Uruk, but they never managed to reach the status of a city. Uruk was the first one to create a stable social hierarchy, a political structure, monumental architecture, and much more. Writing, literature, religion, specialized jobs, everything that makes a city happened here first. One or two of these things certainly happened in other places, but they all happened collectively in Uruk. This led to a massive population boom, towering walls to protect against invaders, and agricultural production along the outskirts of the city walls. We don't know how many people lived in Uruk, but most historians agree it was more than anywhere else in the ancient world at the time. Word of prosperity spread, and people from the country began moving to Uruk in droves until the city was practically bursting. Why do you think people were attracted to city life back in the day? Which do you prefer, the city or the country? Let me know in the comments below. The Blombos Cave Rock Art. The Blombos Cave is a limestone cavern in Africa where the earliest known prehistoric art was discovered. The cave is located about 300 feet from the ocean and 180 miles away from Cape Town. The prehistoric rock engravings that were uncovered in its dark chambers have been dated back to around the year 70,000 BC. The oldest piece consists of a pair of broken ochre rocks carved with abstract symbols and geometric patterns. Additionally, somebody made a necklace out of shells. The next oldest example of cave art is at the El Castillo Cave in Spain, where paintings were drawn 30,000 years later. The Blombos cave art also predates anything similar in Europe by roughly 50,000 years. Even more incredible is that archaeologists also found some of the oldest bone tools in Africa here. They uncovered implements crafted from polished animal bones that date back over 80,000 years. Humans weren't even real humans back then. Have you ever been to a cave with prehistoric art? What was your experience like? The Persian Cant. The Persian Cant was the world's first irrigation system in Iran and throughout other Middle Eastern regions thousands of years ago. The technique involved digging a very long tunnel through dry land to allow water stored in an underground aquifer to spill down into the soil, creating less hostile conditions. Many parts of ancient Persia were desolate, barren, and infertile. The only way to support a huge population and to continue thriving in their great cities was to invent the world's first method of irrigation. The way the Cant worked was by digging a well deep at the top of an elevation. They would dig until they hit the water table, then create an artificial water channel to carry the life-giving liquid down the slope to the land that needed to be irrigated. The water was then moved via a network of dams, gates, and other channels to be distributed as needed. This is amazing because the whole thing was powered by gravity and provided both drinking water and fresh crops for the Persians. It was ingenious, a truly brilliant invention that pushed humanity one big step forward. And even though the Persians were the first to do it, they weren't the only ones who figured it out. Today, there are tens of thousands of Cants, although under different names, preserved in about 35 countries. Pretty impressive, right? Tools older than man. Remember the old bone tools I told you about from Africa? The tools that were 80,000 years old? That's pretty significant. But did you know that the oldest tools ever found are 3.3 million years old? It's true. They're called the Lomekwi tools, and they were found at an excavation site in Kenya. It's especially amazing because nobody knows exactly what the tools were used for. What we know is that somebody, not a human though, as humans hadn't evolved yet, sat down and started chipping away at a rock. They chipped and shaped the rock until it fit snugly in their hand and could be used to prepare meat or crack open nuts. It was a technological advancement that predates humanity. The tools were discovered in a dried riverbed, a small collection of cutting instruments and hammers. They are so old that they beat the previous oldest tools by 700,000 years. Jason Lewis from Rutgers University says the discovery has challenged the idea that human characteristics evolved with us near our origins. By that he means the making of tools, the consumption of meat, and the invention of language. Because these tools are so old, it's clear some unknown distant human ancestors had figured out how to shape rocks to be useful. It happened way before us. Thanks for watching! What's the coolest world first that you saw today? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. We've got lots more videos about amazing discoveries coming up.